Well, now we have faith challenge number 11, and it's about a faith story told. Faith is meant to be talked about. Faith is meant to have a story, and a story worth telling. I think about that chapter over in Hebrews chapter 11, and it goes down through what we call the honor roll or the Hall of Fame of faith. And it talks about the different people that are listed there and how that he didn't have time to tell us about all the people of faith, and he gives us a short list at the end of the chapter. But it's interesting that every one of those people have a story. Now, it's not a story of perfect faith. It's not a story that they did everything correctly, that they just simply blew faith out of the water. Not even Abraham, who is the poster child of faith. Read Romans chapter 4. Even he had his moments where he wasn't acting very much in faith. But even Abraham had a story to tell. It was a story about how God walked with him, talked with him, and led him and guided him and helped him to overcome and to give him success in things that he thought he couldn't do. How God caused his part in a larger story to be significant. You know, there's a lot of stories that need to be told about faith. The faith challenge is for us to talk to our children about that, to tell them the story. You remember at Passover, the children were to ask the question, what is this feast about? And the parent would tell them, it's about when we were delivered from Egyptian bondage. It's about the time when the angel passed over our houses, but he did not pass over the house of the Egyptians, and all the firstborn ones were killed. And how God used that to deliver us from that bondage to captivity. They had a story to tell. You know, I'm very, very thankful that I grew up in a home that had a history of faith. And the more research I do on my family and the more I get to know some of the background of the people, at least the more I understand that, boy, my family is rich in faith. I found an ancestor that his great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents were part of religious persecution in Europe. And eventually the family fled to America and settled in Georgia. And I'm a direct ancestor of some of these people who came from a part of Germany or Austria at the time, the Salzburgers. Great story of faith. To cross the ocean to come to a land they didn't know anything about in order to be able to practice their faith without persecution. They're stories of faith. They need to be told. And we need to be willing to tell our faith story. We need to tell people like Paul did. Remember in Acts chapter 9 is when Paul's conversion took place, but he told the story, at least it's recorded, 2 more times in the book of Acts, chapter 22 and chapter 26. Paul liked to tell his story. Sometimes we call it a testimony of what God did. So what is your faith story? We're on a journey. You know, there were some disciples, 70 of them in Luke chapter 10. They were sent out on a limited commission. They came back and they all had stories to tell. Maybe they sat around the campfire that night and they all, one after the other, told about the experiences they had out on the mission field and how demons were cast out and people came and were healed and all kinds of wonderful things happened, and they told the stories. And when it was Jesus' turn to talk, he looked at them all and he says, you know what? Those are good stories. But I even got a better story for you. I want to tell you about the story of when your name was recorded in the book of life. Now that's a story that needs to be told. If your name is recorded in the book of life. We got some great stories of faith in the Bible. But you know what? God's not done. God is still working in people's lives. I kind of expect he's working in your life. And that if you would just stop and take some time, you would have a story to tell too. Are you telling your faith story? Pass it on to your children, to your grandchildren, to your neighbors, to the people at work, people in your school. Tell your story. Oh, and make sure that in your story that you include the star, the main character of every story. His name is Jesus. Don't leave him out of your story. Faith challenge number 11. Tell your story.